Former President Trump is reportedly telling advisors and allies that he likes the idea of a 16-week abortion ban, with exceptions for rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. The New York Times reports that Trump is waiting to discuss his views in public until the Republican primary is over because he doesn't want to risk losing the support of social conservatives. The Trump campaign called the story fake news and added the former president would be willing to work out a deal that both sides would be happy with. Meanwhile, Democrats and the White House are quickly slamming Trump's reported comments. In a new statement, President Biden writes in part, quote, "Trump is running scared. He's afraid the women of America are going to hold him responsible for taking away their rights and endangering their rights at the ballot box in November," which is exactly what's going to happen. The choice is very simple. Kamala and I will restore Roe v. Wade and make it once again the law of the land. Donald Trump will ban abortion nationwide. Let's bring in the co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader. Lauren, you have a new opinion piece in The Hill titled, "For Biden's core voters, age is minor, but abortion rights are a deal breaker." And you write in part, quote, "Abortion access has been so motivating for voters that activists are advancing state abortion referendums in 9 states, including Montana, Florida, Nevada, and Arizona. If on the ballot, the referendums have the potential to tip the scales for Democratic candidates in those states, which is critical to retaining the Democratic Senate majority and to regaining the House. Support for abortion access should be an easy layup for the president, with real potential to swing even a close election." So, Lauren, speaking to the people around President Trump, I know that they think this idea of originally it was 15 weeks. Now he seems to be proposing 16-week nationwide ban. They say that that could position him as kind of moderate on abortion, even though he had Roe v. Wade overturned, and that's in line with where most of the American public are. How worried are people in the White House that Trump's positioning on this could kind of mitigate some of the energy that we've seen around the abortion issue on the Democratic side?
Well, I think the Trump campaign's a little delusional on this front. There's no evidence from any polling that somehow a 16-week ban is a uniting idea for voters on both sides of the aisle. To the contrary, I think part of what we've seen in the last, year and a half since the Dobbs decision is that a plurality of voters, particularly independent voters, swing voters, suburban voters, and of course, Democratic voters, and especially young voters, do not want government interference in extending abortion bans. And what we've seen in the states that have enacted bans are these horrific healthcare consequences for women. Part of my point in the piece is that I think the Biden administration really needs to make more of this. And by the way, it's not just Trump's comments about this, sort of 16-week supposed compromise. Yesterday, or Friday, in Alabama, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos, non-viable embryos, should be considered children. I mean, this is exactly the kind of legal disaster that many abortion activists have been warning about since the Dobbs decision, that if embryos outside of the womb are considered children by a Supreme Court, what does that mean in terms of other healthcare access and rights? So, I think the Trump campaign's miscalculating, but more importantly, I really think that Biden needs to lean in on this issue in a much more significant way.
Yeah, that's certainly what Democrats have been campaigning on across the country. It's across the country, and doctors are so confused. Yeah. They don't know what they can do and what I really feel for the doctors in Daniela's report there. They just don't know what they can do and what they can't do at risk to themselves.
It's immensely confusing when you look at this patchwork of rules across the country and doctors confused about when they can actually intervene. I've heard so many stories from women on the ground in states like Texas, but across the country, where doctors effectively have to tell them, you got to get sicker in order for me to help you. I mean, it feels so counterintuitive. And I think, Lauren, you and I talk about this all the time. It's why it's such a visceral and palpable political issue, because women are becoming more comfortable sharing their stories. I wonder if you look down the pipeline, though, what does it tell you that the Trump campaign is trying to wait to announce their abortion policy until after the primary? Does that say more about the general election audience, or does it say more about the Republican primary audience? Because this issue has just been so thorny for every Republican that I talk to, and in large part, it's because they're out of step with where most of the country is.
Right. I mean, it's just an absolute political loser. And we've been seeing this around the country. I mean, we just saw this again, even in the New York 3 congressional race, which obviously had other issues on the table, including immigration. But, you know, what Tom Suozzi himself said was that the abortion issue, especially in the ads that he ran, was a huge differentiator. And he was running against a pro-life candidate. We saw that in the special in Florida, obviously in places like Kentucky, where Andy Beshear, you know, a Democrat, wins there largely on abortion politics. So, look, I think the point is that this is a political loser for Republicans. You know, there's no question Donald Trump owns this. He is responsible for the end of Roe, and this idea that somehow coming to a 16-week compromise is somehow going to change things is, I think, a little out of touch. 16 weeks is exactly the same kind of problem we just heard about in Iowa. It doesn't matter how many weeks it is. If there is a woman who is facing a life and death health consequence, a complication from her pregnancy, and doctors are unable to give her care, or there's some crazy set of bureaucracy that she has to work through in order to prove that she merits those exceptions, including for rape or for her life and death situation, you know, that is catastrophic for women. And I think that's going to be prosecuted over and over again in this election. And by the way, if it's not, shame on President Biden, because this is the winning issue for Democrats. And, you know, we've heard, Ali, you know, there's been lots of reporting that privately the president has said he's not super comfortable talking about this stuff. Activists are really frustrated with that. They have got to be hitting on this day after day. And not just the vice president, the president needs to hit on it.
Co-founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader, thank you so much. We will, of course, have much more of this discussion, I'm sure, during the campaign as it heats up, Jonathan.
A defining issue between now and November and beyond.